Welcome to the Oklahoma State Sports Extra podcast. I'm Eli Lederman with Kelly Hines. We're back again. Thank you for joining us for kind of a passing of the beat episode as I close out my time in Stillwater and on the OSU beat, and Kelly gets back started on hers. I guess before we dive into it with me, Kelly, you went to Oklahoma State. You've covered the Cowboys and Cowgirls before. What are you most excited about being back? And I guess just tell the folks who might not know. I don't know why they wouldn't. They should have been following along this whole time with you. But what they don't know about you and what you're most excited about to be back in Stillwater.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 8 years since I was on the beat before, and I think just being back, and I'm not living in Stillwater, but spending a lot of time there. So many of the people around the athletic department are the same, and I think that's the best part of being on a beat, as getting to know the people involved and seeing so many familiar faces. That has definitely made it a lot easier. Still trying to get caught up on all of the personnel with the teams and everything, but definitely excited to be back. And I think it's such a great time for OSU with all of its so much success across the board. When you look at just about every sport, is really thriving. So to see that success within the programs, that's been really cool to see, from a distance, and now covering it up close. It's been good to be back.
Yeah, I think I came onto the Oklahoma State beat, total outsider, last August and covered the last year. And what I found, one of the things I found really interesting were all the connections, and ties. It's not just a football coach who's been around. It's Mike Gundy, who has been there since he got to Oklahoma State in 1986 and is there. Chad Weiberg, he came and went, but his blood is in Stillwater. Josh Holliday, there's a whole lineage there. So all those ties seem to really run through things more so than even other schools in Stillwater, and I found that really interesting. But to your point about it being an interesting time, it's like there's the new and the old. Where Chad Weiberg, for instance, is someone who dates back all the way to the 90s in Stillwater, but he's kind of the new face of Oklahoma State athletics. You've got President Casey Shrum. I think you can look at the basketball program. So J.C. Hoyt and Mike Boynton as kind of windows into the future. So it is a really interesting time, and obviously quite a last year in Stillwater. But Kelly, before we do the sports, you're going to be spending more time in Stillwater again. Food. What are you most excited about being around a bit more, restaurants and things like that in Stillwater?
Oh man. What makes me feel like super old is seeing how many of the places that I went to whenever I was in college that are especially on campus that are now closed. I could talk about that for a very long time, but in terms of places that are still open, I really like Thai Cafe. Thai Loco is a place that I recently discovered. I don't know if you've been there. That place is really good. I could eat Dirty Curdy's every day. Probably not the healthiest thing, but
we are split on the Dirty Curdy. I'm a fan, a hot dog guy. Of course, I ate hot dogs from the Curdy Shack, but I never went for the full Dirty Curdy with cream cheese, a potato chip. What am I missing? Chili?
I think more cheese. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
potato chips on top. I'm a big fan of weird combinations, so I love that, and it's really not something you should eat every day, but I definitely probably could. I think there are some newer restaurants that I haven't been to yet. Definitely excited to spend time in Stillwater, and I really enjoy eating. And barn cokes. Those are, that's a thing for me. Every time I go to Stillwater, I need to have a barn coke, and it just makes the day so much better. So yeah, lots of good places. And I think people kind of dismiss college towns as being college towns, but Stillwater has so many great places. I know it's more than a college town, but yeah, really a great collection of restaurants, and I'm going to hit up all of them.
It's exciting. Well, I'll say this. All due respect to the Curdy Shack, I enjoy their hot dogs. I've enjoyed many of their hot dogs, but not even on my latest night on the Strip. I don't know if I could have gone for a full Curdy dog. I just don't think I could have done it. My absolute favorite spot is maybe a bit of a hidden gem. I bet people in Stillwater have driven past it a bunch, but it's easy to just drive past. But right on Perkins, across from the Walmart, is a taco truck, Sabor Latino, that is my absolute, like, that is what perhaps, I mean, there's a lot of great people in Stillwater, a lot of great things, but what I might miss most about Stillwater is this taco truck. That if you haven't tried it yet, you must. Kelly, that's going to be
Okay.
one of my first assignments to you.
Okay. I'm on it.
It's the real deal.
Okay.
It is
And I
very
mean,
much so the real deal.
if you're going to deal with all of the construction on Perkins, you might as well get through it with a taco.
All that Perkins construction would be better with like some asada tacos. I think that is for sure. But the construction might make you wonder if it's all worth it
I mean,
at all.
if the tacos are really good, it's worth it.
That's a fair point. That's fair. I'm gonna be that'll be my pullback among a few others to Stillwater. It's those tacos. I'm gonna have to get back. But you're headed onto the OU beat. It's kind of the summertime, or excuse me, the OSU beat. That was a bit of a slip there. The OSU beat in it's the summertime, which is kind of a quiet time. We never quite know. I mean, a month from now, last year is when OU and Texas split from the Big 12, and a quiet time turned into a not so quiet time. So, knock on wood, I don't want to give us a heftier workload than we've already got, but it's a quiet time, and we're kind of in between, the end of one sports year in Stillwater and the beginning of the next. So I think before we look ahead, we got to look back. And so if you think back to last August, that's when I got here. And, that Oklahoma State team, I think the only people who thought, were saying Big 12 championship worthy team were Mike Gundy, were some of those players on that team. And then there they were. They took us on that ride. And you've got some historical context on OSU. I was there for the 1 year, but for them to have the team they had, and then to get through November, which I know is like the month for Oklahoma State where good seasons have often gone to die. For them to get through that month, to have the stumble in Arlington in the Big 12 title game, but then to go to the Fiesta Bowl and beat Notre Dame in a big way, I guess, in a sense, you've seen a lot of Oklahoma State teams trip up in November. For them to finish that out, what does that tell you about, I guess, where they were last year, and maybe again a look forward to the future?
Yeah, I mean, just having, been able to watch a lot of those games, just seeing, really just how enjoyable of a season it was. Like, you didn't even have to be a fan to really enjoy, the way that team played. And I think so much of that, at least, from what I saw was, the confidence that Spencer Sanders had in himself and in the offense. And obviously the defense was good too. But I think, he kind of was the face of the team in a lot of ways, and just seeing his belief that, and he still has that. I mean, obviously that wasn't just a one season thing, but seeing him, have that confidence to go out and win games, and then seeing them do that, really was striking to me, because I've seen a lot of good OSU teams, like you mentioned, trip up in November or have confidence and not be able to follow through. And just to be able to see them, have that really great season, and just with a lot of pieces back, you just felt like they're setting the stage for what could be another good season. So really impressive what to see all of the accomplishments that they had, and to see guys like Malcolm Rodriguez really shine on defense, and anytime there's a somewhat local tie that once guys we knew of when they were in high school, that always makes it more enjoyable. And I think just the excitement around the team, it just reminded me a lot of 2011, which was a season that I covered. Obviously that was another really good year with a lot of really fun to watch players. It just kind of reminded me of that, because when a team is having that sort of season, you see a lot more orange. Even here in Tulsa, you see more people are talking about OSU, and it just to have that sort of season, I think that was great for the university. And those are the types of seasons that, anytime there's a good season, enrollment is up, it just becomes more of a talking point for a lot of people who maybe weren't connected to it before.
Yeah, I think the day after the Fiesta Bowl, I wrote a story, whether it was the headline or the nut graph, was about this was Gundy's tightest team. They were really close, and it was a group of guys you had your Malcolm Rodriguez's, Devin Harper. I mean, the safeties group was a cast of characters in its own right, and it was a really tight group. And I think that was probably part of the secret sauce, but also you can see how much they enjoyed that ride. And so it was a special team. And you mentioned 2011. that was something of a springboard. And I think Oklahoma State, at least the feeling there, and certainly if you ask Mike Gundy, is that last year has to be a springboard for them, particularly at this time where the Big 12 is shifting and college football together is shifting. It's an opportunity for Oklahoma State to take advantage, and they have to. But this offseason, they lose a lot of the guys from that team just due to graduation, the draft. They lose Jim Knowles, but then kind of counterpunch, I think, by bringing in Derek Mason, a proven, defensive coordinator there. Having covered spring camp, where do you feel like this team, where are the question marks with this team? If I were to say to you, how do they make it a springboard, build on it? What needs to go right this year for it to be a building process?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a bizarre spring just because, there was just no depth up front on offense. And so, everything that they wanted to do was a struggle because of that. And then you look on the defensive side and they just have incredible depth and talent up front. But I think just seeing how Derek Mason's defense comes together, that's obviously, going to be a big storyline, but it definitely was looking really solid during the spring. And he is just an incredibly impressive person. And, he spent like 6 weeks, like deconstructing the defense just to put it together. And, he compared it to like when he tinkers with old cars and you're like, okay, that makes sense. He's just like kind of someone who blows you away, like when you talk to him. So I definitely feel like the players are going to be, very fired up to play for him once it gets to fall. Obviously, I think that the depth on the offensive line, a lot of that will be resolved. You have some pieces coming in. It's just going to be a matter of how those pieces all fit together, because there is a lot of versatility, within the offensive line. Guys can play different positions, and it's just trying to plug them in the right places. Linebacker, obviously some big shoes to replace there, but I mean, I feel really good about the pieces that they have, really across the board. And I think just trying to see, some of those players who are going to be stepping into bigger roles, how that goes for them. A guy like Mason Cobb, obviously that's a guy who, there's going to be a lot of attention on how that goes for him. And I think really every position group, they're interesting storylines. So it definitely seemed like during the spring there was a lot of excitement, that carried over from last season, and that's what you want to see. So just, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, I think I'm most interested by the offensive line because this is a huge year for Spencer Sanders. I think a lot more, maybe even more so than last year, Oklahoma State's success will hinge more on Spencer Sanders than its defense. And in the past, when Spencer Sanders has struggled, Mike Gundy hasn't laid off him, but he's often said, well, we didn't protect him well. And so this is the story with probably all but a handful of programs every year, the offensive line and what it can do is part of the story here. But I think for Oklahoma State, if you say Spencer Sanders needs to be good for this team to be good, then that's got to start with the offensive line. So they'll have some figuring out to do. I think they've got plenty of talent there to work with, but they're going to have some figuring out. I wonder if, like last year, if September may look a bit interesting, or you're seeing guys rotate around, and the hope there being that by October, when Big 12 play begins, that this team has it figured out up front and can protect him. That'll be important. I guess, it's amazing as I think back on the last year, just how eventful it was. All while this football team was making their big run, we woke up on November 3rd, 2021, to find out that the sanctions had been upheld against Oklahoma State basketball, the men's basketball program. And that was a shock. It was an emotional day. And then that really hung over the entire season in ways that at first the team maybe didn't want to acknowledge, saying we're keeping that out. And then by the end, acknowledging fairly that was a significant issue and something that really did seep in. But they've now hit the off season. Man, voice is going. They hit the off season.
Are you gonna be okay? No. Okay. I'll take over. I think some key pieces are gone, but you have a really good roster back, and I think with Mike Boynton, I haven't been around basketball a ton, but just the enthusiasm that he has about his players, I think that's one of the things that's impressed me the most about him, regardless of how it goes. Like, he loves his guys and they love playing for him. So I think, that was obviously a really difficult situation, difficult season. And now, with that in the past and some different pieces coming in, I think that they can like really put that behind them and now focus on, okay, all of our goals are in front of us now. There's not anything that can hold us back. And let's turn a page with that. So I think, just with how he is as a coach, the guys who were part of that team last year, there's going to be a hunger that's different, from last season. And I think that's kind of what I'm looking forward to, in addition to, it's just different kind of with basketball because you have, a little bit more face time with each player and you kind of can get to know them in a different way than with football. And I'm really looking forward to, I know basketball season is still a ways off, but I always look forward to basketball season for that reason, because you kind of get to know the personalities a little bit more. And, just figuring out all of them. Obviously you've done a lot of great stories about, the guys who have been on the team, but, in terms of the new ones, just figuring them out and finding their stories. Like, I love that aspect of being a beat writer. So, we've got a ways until then, but I'm definitely very excited to see how this basketball team comes together.
Thank you for the save there, Kelly. We're full disclosure, I'm in the final stages of a COVID isolation. But with my, gosh, man, it's back.
It's back. Use some
But with Mike
lozenges.
Last season, they didn't really get the chance to build on the Cade Cunningham year, which would have been looked upon as like, all right, we have the #1 pick. Now let's go to the moon from there. And it didn't happen for a number of reasons. Maybe it never, I think there's questions, at least, would that have happened with or without the sanctions? But that was the reality. But this is a big year, I think, for them. I think the expectation has to be going in that they've got to make the tournament or at least be there at the end of the season. And so it should make for a good one. And speaking of building, JC Hoyt, the new women's basketball coach, that's kind of the start of a new era, and probably it's time for probably a change there and a new face. And I think it should, I would imagine, put some more people in the seats at GIA next year, just people who are intrigued by what JC Hoyt's going to be able to bring.
Yeah. And, that was, I think, my first time back to Stillwater on the beat was her introductory news conference. And she kind of reminds me of Mike Boynton, just like very enthusiastic, very passionate. And anytime there's a coaching change, I think that there's going to be renewed excitement. But I think she really kind of took that to another level with her like own excitement. So, she on that day, stood in front of like, donors and select fans and different people who were there and was like, we need your help to get this going. And I definitely think that, with the players who decided to stay, and then the quite a few transfers coming in, they have a chance to have success in the first season. And the program, I think, is set up for her to be successful. Obviously, she's had success at other places. I really felt like this was a good fit for her because she's from the region. She's coached in the Big 12. She knew Chad Weiberg previously. It just everything lined up for that to, at least on paper, be a great hire. You just don't know how it's going to go from there. I mean, anytime I cover an introductory news conference, I think about all of the introductory news conferences I've covered when things did not go well from there. So you can be easily impressed by someone on day one, but then, you just don't know how it's going to go. So, but I definitely feel like it's set up for her to be successful. And she's obviously a good coach. She has good players on the team. You're playing in a great historic arena. You have a good staff that you've compiled. I think everything is there. I think there's support from the university. I think really with every sport, I think that's really one of the things that's struck me, being back on the beat is how just, the university, from president all the way down, I feel like there's support there for athletics. And I don't know how much of that was there in the past, but it just seems like it's there now. And that's what matters. So I feel like, that's going to be really interesting to see how it goes in year one, because it could go any number of ways, but yeah. I feel like it could be good.
Yeah, I think every program at Oklahoma State and every school that's going to remain in the Big 12 kind of has maybe a bit of they're going to hit a juncture here where they go one way or the other as things change. But I do think with the women's basketball program, with JC Hoyt, with the talent there is in this state in women's basketball, and now she's going to be competing with another kind of rebuilding, but promising. They had a really promising first season with Jenny Bronchek. The Sooners and Norman are on the rise, and I think it'd be amazing if 5 years from now we're looking at both of these coaches still in their jobs and to see what they've built, and hopefully we'll be building something pretty special. We're probably not going to get to everyone here. We've got, the equestrian team, national champions. We've got a national champion in cross country and indoor track, or one of the other, Taylor Rowe. The tennis teams had great seasons, but we've only got so much time. So we'll close out with softball and baseball, the two big spring sports, who sort of, at times this season, their seasons mirrored each other, of some really high highs and during the regular season, some lows and fighting out of that. But it was Oklahoma State softball that kind of kept it going and had that momentum all the way into June in their run here in Oklahoma City. Whereas baseball program, which at times this year, they rattled off something like 12 straight wins. They looked like the Oklahoma team that would be in Omaha. Meanwhile, later today, we'll be watching the Sooners there. But with the softball program, this was the latest, greatest year under Kenny Gajewski. The furthest they've made it under him. They matched the high win total. And again, in year 7 for him, it was another sign of progress. As they, I don't know about, it's a hard gap to close, but they're beginning to at least get closer and closer to what Oklahoma is. And that's pretty spectacular when you consider where the program was when he took over.
Yeah. And I think, OSU has never had a women's team win an NCAA championship, but I feel like they're so close. It's just like a matter of time. I think with tennis, and you could literally go down the list, but especially with softball, where that program is now, just compared to where it was 15, 20 years ago, to be a contender, when you've had to play in the same conference as OU, and you're kind of, overshadowed somewhat because of what, OU's been able to do, have that sustained success. I think it's been really fun to see this OSU program just build and build and build to the point that they're almost there. They've had that success, and they're able to get really good players. I saw them. I've seen them play Tulsa several times when I was on the Tulsa beat, and just to see them, the amount of talent that they have. Like, it's hard to envision them being much better than what they are. And when you're at the top, I know it's still, you still have a ways to go before you're a program like OU, but to be there, it's really incredible. And it's just been fun to see. And I think along with that, just seeing softball in Oklahoma become what it is, colleges and high school, a lot of talent, and even at the lower levels, we've seen that with the success of the other college programs have had. I think that has made it really enjoyable. If you're a softball fan, like Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma is a great place for you to be. So I think that's it couldn't be better anywhere else. I know other states have good softball, but this is definitely the best place where you can see a variety of teams have success. And OSU, to have the program where it is now, it's been really impressive to see.
You've got Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. You've got further down, I think Rogers State's national champion. Oklahoma dominated softball this year. And then at the end of it, whether the Oklahoma schools are even in it, which this year they were, we were this close to that Bedlam final, you're going to have the College World Series in OKC. So if you are a softball fan, there's not a better place to be. Kelly, while I was in OKC with the softball, you were enduring some very long nights at O'Brate Stadium, and you saw Oklahoma State close out a season against clearly a pretty talented Arkansas team that is still alive in Omaha. So that they didn't go out, they didn't get upset by a small school or anything. But I think most people would probably register this Oklahoma State baseball season in the end as a disappointing finish. What was the vibe there at the end of what they felt happened and where they felt like they're going to go from here?
Yeah, that was kind of a crazy regional, not just with all of the runs scored, but you look, I know that every regional, like once you get to the postseason, anyone could beat anyone, but it was it was really impressive to see those 4 teams up close. And, I think the thing with Arkansas, they'd lost like 6 of 8 or some, they were not doing well going into the regional, but they had quite a few fans there. They definitely seemed motivated by their struggles, which had, were very recent struggles, whereas OSU, incredibly talented team. Just, baseball is just, it's a tough sport throughout the duration of a season to stay really steady. And even though I felt like there was a certain level of consistency at times, it just, the expectations were very high, and just getting it done is not easy, especially in those settings. Once it gets to a really high stakes, once you're in the postseason, I definitely felt like fans were disappointed, especially with the way it played out. Still was a good season. It just, definitely left you wanting a little bit more, even though there was a lot of baseball played, especially over those few days. It definitely kind of, you felt like it was there for OSU's taking, and it just didn't really go completely according to plan. And some of that is, pitching and just, different things that play into it. But I think maybe just from having seen OSU baseball over the course of my entire life, I know how difficult it is to really put it all together when the season is on the line. And that's been a recurring thing. So I definitely felt like they could have made it to Omaha. It definitely was an Omaha type team, but making that happen, especially when you have a team like Arkansas in your regional, which, as you mentioned, still playing a really good team. I just did not really come together in the best way, but it's still, that I'd never really covered college baseball before, just because of the way we had our beats set up previously. And, it is really enjoyable. Both baseball and softball, I think, are so underrated in terms of, what it's like to cover those sports. We always talk about football and basketball, but, those sports are so enjoyable to cover, especially once it gets to late in the spring and early in the summer. And I just absolutely loved, kind of being thrown in late in the season was a challenge, but trying to figure those guys out and their different personalities, that was really enjoyable. And they're obviously going to lose some talent, but they had a lot of young players who I feel like they can build on this season.
Perhaps most crucial, at least up ahead for Oklahoma State, is what's going to happen in the Major League Baseball draft. Jackson Holliday, familiar last name there, son of Matt Holliday, nephew of Josh Holliday, and whether he's going to, he'll be drafted high, we know that, but whether he'll choose to sign with whichever major league team takes him or come to Stillwater next year, that could have some pretty significant bearing on what next season looks like. But I think, as we've learned with Josh Holliday's teams, he's always going to bring talent back. They're going to be competitive at the top of the Big 12, and then it just comes down to what they can do when we hit May and June. But Kelly, I think that wraps it up. I think we hit everything, and if we haven't, I'm sure we'll hear about it. So I think that does it. We're going to head out for both of us for some needed vacations, and then we'll be back for Big 12 Media Days and the whole thing, and it'll all start again. But I'm really, really excited to be passing off the beat to you if I had to pass it off to anybody. And I'm really thrilled to see what you're going to be doing in Stillwater.
Well, thank you. I feel like I have big shoes to fill. You did a really great job. I know it was a short time on the beat, but I know that you established relationships, and now I'm going to try to step into those and carry it on. Just most importantly, I need you to make sure Marshall Scott's doing okay. That's my biggest concern, is not being there. Is Mr. Pistol's firing? As long as he's taken care of, we'll be good. Oh yeah, I'm sure he'll be fine. All right, folks. Well, thank you for listening. You can find us. Clearly, you found us somewhere if you've gotten to this point of the podcast, but you can find us at TulsaWorld.com, and of course, all of our words there. The podcast can also be found on Spotify, Apple, Google, anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm sure you can find us. And thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.